Everybody get their cup of coffee? Everyone settled in? Oh, and there's alcohol approaching, so things are going to get crazy. So we're going to spend, so we started the day off with a town hall. So we started the day off with a town hall, which was basically our way of, having closed doors, have all the agencies in a room, talking about the issues that really sort of matter. So I'm going to bring up John Weisgerber. He's the Senior Vice President of Sales at GumGum, and he was sort of diligently taking notes in the town hall. So we're going to get him to tell us what he learned. Come on up, John. All right, so I've got my first question for you is, I know you were taking a lot of notes. Are those your notes?
This is a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
so what was like the one thing that you heard from the agency side that surprised you?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me was that we share a common difficulty, and our town hall discussion was around talent and retaining talent and innovation and culture. And what I was surprised to hear was we're actually having the same issues.
By we, you mean in your industry?
From an ad platform perspective,
okay.
Who's calling on advertising agencies,
right.
Hearing from the agencies that they're having similar difficulties was actually a surprise.
Was there a project, because we discussed recruitment, we also talked about retention, we talked about salaries, competition. So when it comes to talent, which is this big bucket that almost this whole day is actually going to be about, there were a lot of little things that we touched on. Was there one particular issue that sort of, you said, okay, that's interesting. I didn't think about that before.
Actually, you mentioned it earlier, but competition, the competition for talent and where the competition rests, this idea that competition is coming from consultancies like Deloitte or Bear Stearns, from actual media companies like Facebook, Google, where some of the agency talent is moving toward those particular areas. But I think one of the things that is a constant, one of the things that I find from the ad platform or sales side is that there is a sense of wanting to be at the cool place, right? Wanting to be at the cool place, wanting to be around winners. And it was such an interesting dialogue. Honestly, guys, it's the first time I've sat in a room with a group of agency executives and heard some of the thinking around that idea of how do you retain those key people? And I thought loyalty was another one, the idea of there's no loyalty any longer. And to me, I think about loyalty in a way where can an individual actually look across the desk to the person to whom they're reporting and say, hey, you know what, someday I want to be that person, or I want to be in that position. And I think that even in our area in terms of ad sales or on the agency side, that idea of loyalty being, are the individuals sitting across the desk the ones who've been treated fairly, who've been moved up regularly, who have more security because they've been there longer. And I think if you were to ask those questions on my side or on the agency side, the answer right now is no. So it's a cultural element that I think was really interesting.
I thought the one thing we talked about that, about loyalty was that, like, do we reward loyalty in the right places? And I think it's something somebody said, somebody jumps ship and comes over here, we'll give them a huge pay bump. But then the person who's actually been here 10 years, they're sort of still plodding along in the career path that they were in before. So, that's an interesting kind of notion. What did you think of that kind of notion that that the agency world doesn't reward loyalty as so much as it rewards people who are actually willing to jump ship and take risks? Is it a similar thing on the ad platform industry? Is it totally different where you come from?
I think
because you guys haven't been around as long.
Well, what's interesting though, I'm new to what would be considered a late stage startup.
Right.
I've been with traditional companies like Hearst and Forbes for years. And so the experience of moving to something that's moving quickly, that is sort of cool and fun and winning is interesting. But what I thought was fascinating in terms of the agency discussion was there wasn't a lot of discussion about money necessarily. It was part of our discussion, right? In terms of being able to retain individuals.
Yeah.
But at least from the standpoint of our discussion, that idea of the millennial, and even the person who was speaking on behalf of all millennials, that idea of being able to move around and get different experiences before they found a place where they would find merit. So that idea of moving around wasn't necessarily for the next highest paying bidder, but literally, how can I get different experiences?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I know that some of the challenges that you saw in the town hall are also on the board. So this is the part where I ask for the weather. Just kidding. So Tanya Dua is our reporter who covers agencies, and she's sort of been arranging all of these in different themes. So can you tell us sort of what you're seeing and what some of the interesting ones are? What's the one that is surprising you the most?
Becoming and staying hot, because that's something that touches upon literally every other aspect that people have touched upon, including talent, including digital, including managing client expectations. So whoever said that, please tell me what you mean by that, because I'm pretty stumped. But talent, of course, is standing out. There's a whole row of it. It's the most number of people talking about it. And what's interesting is that it's not just about acquisition and retaining. It's also about attracting data, talent from data, which is again something that came up in the town hall. When you're competing with the Googles and Facebooks, how do you attract talent from those streams? Another thing that came up is in terms of like a big broad bucket. It's process. So that's again, people working in silos, and how you're breaking down boundaries and getting different departments to work together. Plus, internal and external communication, which all falls within that.
Can I actually stop you? Because I think that the thing about the process and the silos is interesting. Because when you're talking to agencies, you're coming up against all these silos, if there are any. Is that something that you're seeing, that agencies are still very bucketed, even though they're trying not to be? Is that something that you see happening when you're talking to these guys?
I think that we're all so pressed for time on every side, and the consideration of what's billable, right? We're all trying to bring revenue into our organizations, but how do we do that? How do we do it effectively? I think that the time is the biggest issue right now. People just not having enough. Not just silos, but literally having the bandwidth to manage the volume of what I would call tech companies or new advertising platforms that are coming out. How do you choose with whom you meet? But I think what was, to kind of go back to some of the questions around agency, I thought one of the bigger issues was culture. And when I say culture, meaning someone had mentioned in the town hall, what do we want to be as an industry? And I thought that was a pretty insightful question in terms of coming from a group that I'm not normally around hearing what's going on. But in my younger years, I know that I look young, but I've been around for a while, culture was such a big part of every place that I went, feeling, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of purpose, feeling like I contributed in some form or fashion was such a big deal. And actually it still is, but recognizing now that you've got these large holding companies that are demanding, demanding their pound of flesh from this group, how do you establish a culture where you get an individual who's right out of college, have spent $200,000 on an education, and allow them to have a little bit of fun, right?
Absolutely.
What is the culture?
Tanya, I do want to finish off what you were saying about what other challenges you're seeing with agencies, especially about culture.
Finally, there's also ad blocking. At least 4 to 5 of them talk about ad blocking.
What exactly are they saying about ad blocking?
There's ad blocking, viewability is a big problem. Ad blocking and implications, does that mean better creative, or does that mean something else in order to address the problem? How do you actually address it? It seems to be a big concern here. There's also 360-degree attribution. And then following up to that, someone wrote digital is not only last click attribution. So how do you approach it from a 360-degree perspective is also kind of emerging as a theme here.
Cool. I want to take the last 30 seconds and go over what the challenges on the tech provider thing was, because I want to see what you think of those.
Talent again seems to be a concern.
Right, which is exactly
so
what John
as
was
you
talking
mentioned, it was kind of a problem across the board. And then the move to HTML5 is interesting. We wrote about this, and the death of Flash has kind of been kind of a recurring theme. So it's interesting that someone brought up HTML5 here. So
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, we've got about 40 seconds left, so I just want to ask you one last thing. I know you didn't put a challenge up, but what would you have put if you were up there to put one up right now?
That's interesting. I didn't imagine that coming. I think standing up here and talking to this group and having them not look at me as the devil. I think that was. But no, I have to say, if I look at this, I think the number one consideration again goes back to talent. It really, I think having the people that are actually believers versus workers is a significant challenge.
Absolutely. Great. Well, John, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank
and
you
thank
so
you,
much.
Tanya.
Thanks, guys.